Hello, my name is Sarahi Jimenez, and today I'm going to be talking about place and the importance of the major role it plays in literary writing. The major role played by place for any storyline is that of making the story cohesive. Although in order for the place to achieve the success of this role, it must first play many other minor but still important roles. In this lecture, I will be discussing the 4 minor roles that stood out to me the most throughout the course of the semester. Specifically, the role of characterization of character, the role of course of action, the role of objective of interpretation, and the role of audience relationship. Now, before I go on to discussing each of these 4 roles, I would like to ask that throughout the lecture you keep in mind that each of the following roles are not individual contributors for a piece of writing. Rather, they are each correspondent to one another in order to ultimately create a cohesive piece of writing, thus fulfilling place's ultimate major role. Now let's move on and take a look at the first role, characterization of character. Now when the word character comes to mind, most of the time we think of the main character of the story or the writing or the poem or whatever type of piece of writing it is. But in this case, characterization of character is what forms and molds and influences this character. Now, this character does not always have to be an individual. It could be a place, it could be a thing, it could even be a type of thought, because character, as defined, is the distinctive nature of something. Thus, that means that this distinctive nature is the uniqueness. Like when we look at different people, everybody has their own personality. Everybody has their own track of mind. Everybody reacts differently. Everybody thinks differently. And they process everything differently. And this is their character. Same with even clothing. If we looked at clothing, sneakers, they have their own character versus boots, right? Sometimes we look at tennis shoes and you think of sports. And that's a totally different agenda than a boot would have. A boot would probably be to go out in the snow or when it's cold outside. So they have their own character for certain reasons, and this is influenced by the surroundings. So that gives a little bit more of an explanation on how character can be encompassed by subjective means or objective means. Now, another important thing to notice when you are looking at place and its characterization is that although place and setting work together and they form this place, they are not necessarily the same thing. You see, the setting does not provide a characterization for the story or anything in the story. The setting is simply where the actions or events are taking place. The place, on the other hand, is what is influencing these actions, what is telling the story, carrying the story. You never leave that broad place. As for the embodiment, I think it's already kind of self-explanatory with the subjective and objective means and the setting and the place. But just to give a little bit more of explanation on the embodiment, it's basically a character, or whatever is carrying this character, to mirror or reflect the characteristics of the place that it is at. So what the character is basically doing with embodying the place that it's in is providing a direct connection or understanding connection between the audience and the storyline. Now, a novel that provides a perfect example of this is Stephenie Meyer's novel Twilight. If you're not familiar with the film or the novel, it is basically about a girl. Her name is Bella, and she moves to a small town with her father, which she has not lived with in many years. So she moves to this town, and she is unfamiliar. She is kind of starting to get to know her dad again, and throughout the story, she falls in love with a vampire. So this first-person narration by Bella automatically connects this character to us. It allows us to almost feel like we are the character herself. Because she is coming to this town, is getting to know her dad, getting to know the town, getting to know the people. Well, we don't know any of these people either. So it's allowing us to use her as a mechanism to almost first-handedly get to know everything around us, get to know our surroundings, get to know the place we are in. Now, this place has a cold atmosphere because we are so unaware. Like they say, you're kind of warming up to people, you're warming up to a place, you're warming up to a thought. Well, We can't get warm unless we're cold at first, which we are because we don't know where we are. And as I said before, the character reflects the place, which it is right now. Being cold is reflecting the place because Forks is a very cold town. It's raining, it's snowing, she's always wearing a jacket, she's always wearing a scarf, she's always trying to keep warm. So this is kind of validating this characteristic, it's being reflected by the character, as I said. The distant attitude. Bella, when she gets there, she makes a few friends and she'll go out and hang out with them, but she's not exactly opening up to them, which is okay. It is a good characteristic because as we're reading this novel, we basically are the first person. So we're not judging Bella as much as we're judging the people around her. And her being distant is allowing us to get our own judgment of the people around her, for us to grow warm with them, just like the cold atmosphere. We're warming up to these people. This is also characterized by the place because this town is in the middle of nowhere. You're kind of alone. You feel alone when you're there. And being in a rural, remote town really enhances that. As for the irresistible curiosity, well, this place, as I said, is remote. It's it's not something you hear about all the time. It's new, it's different. It's obviously going to have its own culture, its own characterization, and we don't know. But we're wanting to learn, and so is Bella. So this really comes together with the place and the character, and it allows us to move along with the character and learn these things for ourselves. So this next part was kind of to explain those, but it's just kind of a brief review of each of those things. The first narration allows us to learn with her. The distant attitude allows us to judge around her. And the irresistible curiosity allows us to also ask our own questions and have her answer these questions for us. So this next part is a quote from the novel, and this is when Bella is describing the town. She says, "It was too green an alien planet." Now, this is obviously a physical characteristic of the town, which is the place of the story. And it perfectly encompasses the storyline. When she says it was too green, she's describing all of these trees. Way too many trees, she thinks. Something she's not used to. And this characteristic of too many trees also causes the idea of hidden things. When things are crowded, you can't really see what's in between there. You don't know what's within it, and we want to know. So that kind of goes with the curiosity and the secrets of the story. And when she says green, I would think that green things are good things, right? Because in the rest of her description, she does say that's a beautiful place. It's nice, it's green. So it's almost too good to be true, right? Now, in the second part of that quote, it says an alien planet. So it's something she's not used to. And this goes on to almost foreshadow when she meets Edward. Edward is the vampire, and he's beautiful. She's instantly attracted to him, which is almost like that irresistible curiosity. And of course, he's a vampire, so it's the unrealisticness of it, the supernatural, which goes with the alien part. Unrealistic and supernatural, obviously. Alien is basically the same thing as a vampire. It's non-human. It's nothing from this planet, right? Well, I guess according to the book, it is from this planet, but in our sense, it's not. The next important role that place plays in literature is the course of action. Now, in most cases, when people take on a certain plan or a certain agenda to do something, it is usually emotionally driven. Now, this emotional drive is almost a validation, but most of the time, these emotional validations are not what ultimately decides what route they decide to take in order to achieve their goal or intent, right? So, as a human, we like to doubt ourselves, we like to overthink things, and we kind of need something to push us or tell us what to do. And in writing, place plays the role of doing that, pushing them, basically telling them what to do, especially when they have their history and their culture, and the actions kind of match what that place stands for. So when they're matching up like that, the character is obviously being influenced by the characteristics of the place, which makes sense because the character is made and influenced by the same characteristics that the place has. The other good thing about this is that by doing this, we can avoid contradiction and confusion. Now, when you're wanting to tell a certain story to an audience who does not share your same track of mind or might not even be familiar with the place, you really want to avoid all the confusion that you can. So with this matching up of the character and the place and the intention and the course of action, everything going together and just making sense, makes it so much easier for the audience to enjoy what they're watching, or stay reading, and just truly understand why the character is doing what they're doing and why the story is taking the course that it's taking. A perfect example of just how significant the impact of a place can have on a character and the course of action that it decides to take, or he or she decides to take, is Danny Ocean and Ted Griffin's film Ocean's 11. Now, we are all familiar with the storyline to this film as we were required to watch it for this course. We know that Danny Ocean was leaving jail because he had previously done some criminal things in anger of losing his love, his wife specifically, to another man, and he still loves her. And when he leaves jail, he decides to continue his vengeance on this man because, like I said, he loves his wife. Now, despite the fact that the man that now has the love to his wife and his own love owns 3 casinos, this is not why Danny Ocean took this action. Because if they were not in Las Vegas, this man wouldn't even have casinos in the first place, because anywhere else in the country does not have casinos the way Nevada, especially Las Vegas, does. Secondly, if Las Vegas wasn't so known for being so scandalous, focused on money, chaotic, and full of people that don't have a lot of reason in them, he probably also wouldn't feel comfortable to do such a thing. But because the city is characterized by these things, not only does he not feel uncomfortable, he feels validated to do so. And this city is also known for its motto saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. As I mentioned before, most of the time, emotions are what drive people to ultimately decide what course they're going to take, along with the place. So, with this motto, you can see how the place fully engages him in using that influence rather than his emotions while he's in the city. Because emotions, they don't get to stay in Vegas. Whether they grew there or they grew outside of there, the emotions are going to leave with you no matter what. And I'm pretty sure that Danny Ocean does not plan on taking this crime with him wherever he goes. Just telling everybody, hey, I robbed 3 casinos because I wanted my wife back, or this man stole my love. So he totally had to blind these emotions with the influence of Las Vegas. And that is how the city totally has the ability of playing the role of fully deciding what course of action the character is going to take. Of course, it would take a lot more than just chaos and scandal and money for him to want to rob casinos. This is a city with casinos that are making a lot of money. This is a big crime. Well, when we get to know Groban, a man who Danny Ocean asked for advice on how to rob this casino or how successful he will be and how to do it, Groban begins to tell him about the 3 most successful robberies in the history of Las Vegas, which is no surprise now why he decided to rob a casino. Las Vegas has a history of this, and not only a history, but a success rate. So why wouldn't he? Even more so, just how the place validates his actions. It is the culture and the history, especially of Las Vegas, that is inspiring him to take such risky decisions. So this is how we can see the full chemistry between a place and the character, and how the character embraces the characteristics of the place, and as I said before, it mirrors the culture and the history of the place. It's fully embracing it as a story altogether, because the character is nothing without the place, and the place is nothing without the character, unless they contradict each other and don't share anything in common at all. In that case, as I said before, there can be confusion and irritation throughout the story. Now that we have that covered, we can move on to the next role, which is objective of interpretation. Now, the interpretation of a story from every individual is going to differ from each person, because everybody has and forms their own opinions and thoughts on certain things and for certain reasons that cannot be changed or modified by the story in any way, because the people reading these stories or watching these films, they already have their own personalities and their own characteristics, and they're going to form things and think of things the way they want to and the way they've learned to along their lives. Another way that they can have different interpretations is by the perspective that they choose to see the story from. It doesn't always have to be from the narrator's point of view. They can see it from simply another character in the story. They can see it from that view. But at the same time, regardless of which perspective they take on, some of the things that will always play a part in how they interpret things will be morals, beliefs, attitudes, desires, especially experiences. And it doesn't always have to be their own. Sometimes some readers do like to fully put themselves in a character's point of view and mindset. But whether it be their own, a character's, or the places, all of these things take a big part of that. And a lot of these things in a story are formed by the place around them. So the morals, the beliefs, the experiences, the attitudes, and the values that readers are going to be experiencing through the writing is going to be coming from the place. Because the place, as we mentioned before, is what is characterizing the characters and deciding what courses of actions they are going to take, which is what ultimately decides the experiences, of course, the beliefs and the morals that go into play with all of those things. It's so important to realize and recognize that interpretations will never be the same between two individuals, because no two individuals are exactly the same, and even if they were, they probably wouldn't think the same things at the same time in the same way, because to form an interpretation, it takes an individual process where people take different things into consideration and they take different perspectives and just different ways. The best pieces that truly allow the place to fully create a middle ground for the reader and allow them to see almost the true intentions from different perspectives instead of it creating confusion between people and considerations are those that have different narrations between different characters from the story. Because when books or films do this, we're not only seeing from one person's point of view. We're not only taking some feelings into considerations and sometimes even facts. And facts are some of the most important things in a story. And as we know, there are always two sides to a story, if not more. So the place is that steady ground, and it's that sure thing that is keeping the story together and allowing all these perspectives to still work with each other, to still make sense despite their differences. Now let's take a look and discuss the final role, which is audience relationship. This may be one of the most important roles that plays can possibly play for any type of literature, because the audience relationship is going to define the effectiveness that the story has on the reader or any type of audience. In order for a place to create an understanding for a reader and for them to understand the characters, the actions, and be able to interpret it along the lines that the author wants it to, the author needs to embrace everything he wants within the characterization of the story with details, explanations, history, meanings. Without any of these things, the place almost becomes irrelevant to the story, or the story becomes irrelevant to the place. Either or, there is a sense of irrelevance that throws off the story and the relationship because there's no cohesive communication. In other cases, sometimes authors like to make a place that is relatable to the majority of people, and there are ways to do this, because although some people might not experience the same weathers or even sights, giving the place the right personality can still connect to many individual people, whether they are different or not. Because behind characteristics and personalities, there are emotions, and every human has the same emotions. So we can all relate on that level. So if the author knows how to encompass these things within the place or embrace the place with these things, we can connect in that way and create a similar understanding of the story. It's the understanding of the background, basically. So the understanding of the background is extremely important, but it's even more important to create a strong background with the place, because without this, there is no base for the story, there is no structure for the story, and there'd be nothing for different people to connect through. So ultimately, this place is going to be able to connect the author to the reader through their writing if they can create a good relationship through the place that the author is trying to take its audience to. It just depends on how successful the author is able to do this with good backgrounds, history, and descriptions. So that is basically how I see these 4 roles coming together in order to create a good, cohesive piece of writing that makes sense and develops a good story with a good relationship between the author and the audience.